He knew he was dying. I knew he was dying, but he still couldn't admit it to me. The next day, he passed away. I grew up in Wolverhampton with my dad, but a few months before his cancer diagnosis, I moved to London. We spoke on the phone all the time, but he never mentioned that he was ill. Maybe he was trying to protect me, maybe he couldn't admit it to himself, but either way, by the time I got home for Christmas that year, the man I'd known my whole life had faded away. He was gaunt and frail, and the house he loved so much was unrecognisable. Pots and pans stacked in the kitchen, half-eaten meals rotting into the carpet, bags of rubbish everywhere. He had completely lost control. But on the phone he told me everything was fine. Why couldn't he tell me, or even a doctor, the truth? When I saw him and how he'd been living, I was devastated. I realised in that moment that things were far worse than he'd ever let on, and it set in motion everything that happened next. I spent Christmas Eve cleaning the whole house, throwing out rubbish, cooking dinner. After we ate, I called the doctor, and they called an ambulance to take him to hospital, and soon after that he was moved to a hospice. His cancer was already advanced. I didn't understand then that hospice meant he wouldn't be coming out again. I saw him almost every day, and he never once told me he was dying. One day after visiting, the doctors asked to speak to me. They said, "He's at the end now. He's got a week, maybe 2. I went back to Dad's room to ask him how he felt about his outlook, and I remember he looked out the window for the longest time, and we sat in silence. And then he looked back at me and he said, "I'm gonna be fine. I'll be home soon." I knew then that I could never have a conversation with my dad about life or death. So I went along with the lie. I told him I loved him, and by the next day, he'd passed away. That was the last conversation I ever had with my dad. And for the longest time, that moment felt like the end of the story. But after he died, I found something that changed everything. A hidden box under his bed. Inside were clues to a life I'd never thought of before. A different age, a secret wife, a hidden family. I had so many questions and nobody to ask. That's when I decided to start looking. And that's what led me to create Hidden Roots, to document the journey and share it with all of you. If you've been watching the series already, you know where this story has taken me, so you might want to skip ahead to the next chapter. If you're new, welcome. Let me take a minute to catch you up on what Hidden Roots is all about. This is my dad, Peter Oteng. He moved to the UK from Ghana in the 60s and built his life here. He met my mum, had me, and settled down with her in Wolverhampton, where I grew up in the 90s. Their relationship was rocky, but they stuck together so I could grow up with both of them around. They finally separated when I went to secondary school. It was left to me to deal with death certificates, funeral arrangements, and clearing out Dad's house after he died. But pretty quickly, I started to uncover secrets that turned my understanding of who he was upside down. In his bedroom, among the piles of old work papers and clothes, I started to find things like documents, passports, certificates, photographs, things that pointed to a very different life than the one I'd known. Things he'd kept hidden from me, my mum, and everyone else while he was alive. First, I found his old Ghanaian passport, which showed his real date of birth made him 10 years older than we always thought he was, and with a different birthday. He'd been using a fake age and fake birthday since he moved to the UK. So he wasn't 64 when he died like I thought, he was 75. The lie about his age messed up his pension payments, his funeral care policy, it put the house at risk, it created chaos. Then after that, I discovered a marriage certificate, but my mum and dad were never married. It turned out that my dad had gotten married in 1974 to a woman named Irene, way before he ever even met my mum. He never told her about it, and they never got divorced. So my dad, the man that taught me to be honest, to do the right thing, had been lying about so much. So who was he? And what else had he been hiding? There was plenty more to come. There really is plenty more to come, so consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you get alerted when the next episode is out. I knew that Dad came from a big Ghanaian family. He was one of 13 brothers and sisters, but I had no idea what they were like because Dad would never speak about his family or where he'd come from. And I always assumed that he had no contact with them and no relationship with them. But under his bed, I found a box full of old photographs and letters and little memories from his family. It was like this whole world that he'd kept hidden. And that's when I realized it wasn't that he didn't have a relationship with his family. It was just that he decided to keep them secret. I'd always wanted to meet the family, so with these clues I'd found, maybe I'd have a way of tracking them down. Once I found all this out, I decided to look back through Dad's life, retracing his footsteps from Ghana to the UK, speaking to his old work colleagues and school friends to see if I could understand why he'd kept so much about his life hidden. Along the way, I uncovered more clues, long-lost friends, and new mysteries. It took me across continents. I may have even discovered that I have brothers out there who I've never met. I got the chance to meet some amazing people and had some incredible discoveries. Finally, finding one of my cousins, Edward, who lives of all places in Peckham, just down the road from where I was living at the time in Brixton. I put out the first series in 2023, but a lot has happened since then and I still had a lot more questions. Why had he kept so much hidden about his life? What did the family know about why Dad had cut off contact with them? What happened to my dad's secret wife, and was there any way to track her down now? When I met one of my dad's old school friends, he'd shown me a picture of him with 3 children that Dad had brought with him. Were these all his children? Were these all my brothers? So that's Hidden Roots in a nutshell. A series all about family secrets, identity, and my journey to uncover who my dad really was. For this episode, I wanted to go a little deeper, not just into the discoveries and mysteries, but a look at who he was and the relationship that we had, because our relationship wasn't always easy. I don't care if you love me, but you will respect me. Of all the things my dad ever said, that's the one that sticks with me the most. He was a typical first-generation immigrant dad, sometimes distant, deeply focused on education. Me, on the other hand, I was loud, maybe annoying, creative, always asking why. I wanted to be a singer. He didn't really get that. I think he tried to understand me in his own way, but I was a lot. Always in trouble, smart but mouthy, constantly clashing with teachers. But my primary school was a troubled place. The headmaster used to tell the students he had a gun in his office and he would take us there to shoot us with it if we misbehaved. One time a teacher banged my head against a wall while they were telling me off. And when I told another teacher what had happened, I got in trouble for lying. They would march us off to the church to pray for forgiveness for being such bad children. We were 5 to 10 years old, by the way. And through all of this, my dad always sided with the school. He believed the headmaster, a man who I honestly believe had no business being anywhere near children. My mom tried to push back, but Dad would never support her. He'd undermine her in front of the headmaster, making her look emotional and hysterical, which the head loved. He didn't believe me, and that created distance between us, and I think between him and my mom as well. Looking back now, I think I understand him better. He was a former teacher. He came from a culture where you respect your elders no matter what. He'd survived in the UK by keeping his head down and doing what was expected. So siding with the school, even when they were in the wrong, probably felt like the safe and sensible thing to do. But for me, it felt like a betrayal. As I got older, things began to shift. He softened, I got less mouthy. We found more of a rhythm. I knew our relationship only went so far. To me, his world felt small. Work, school, the garden, EastEnders. But in our own little way, we got on. And he was a man who achieved a lot. He got his degree in the UK and worked his way up at the Commission for Racial Equality at a time when this country was hardly famous for its welcoming attitudes towards black professionals. He believed deeply in fairness, in justice, in making this country a better place for people that look like him and like me. So let me introduce you to the version of Dad that the outside world knew, through some of the people that knew him best. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying this episode, then subscribing and sharing are the best ways to support the channel, and it tells me to keep making more videos like this in the future.
He was very rational.
Yeah.
We had beliefs that we shared and things that we disagreed on. But, I mean, I can't remember ever having a really big disagreement about anything else. I mean, you've got to remember, he was one of the most empathetic people that I knew.
Yeah.
He was the gentlest, kindest.
Yeah. You were really close. Yeah, he was a great man. You know what? It was just it was a real shock to me to even know that there were still people out there like you that had relationships like that with him, and it was really heartening for me to know that he touched other people's lives. Yeah.
I had not dismissed the possibility
That he was still here.
like I was saying about little windows into the past. They're still so vivid. They're more real than the present. And like that,
Yeah.
he's gone.
Yeah.
Well, I thought, well, you know, it's been so many years, why should I expect to ever see him again? But
Yeah.
it's
We
still...
kind of always maybe hoped you might.
Well, I did.
Yeah. My first meeting with Ian, Dad's closest friend from the college he went to when he first arrived in the UK, was a revelation to me. I'd always known him to be a pretty solitary guy, never really having friends or getting too close to anyone. And here I was, sat across the table from someone who had been brought to tears by the fact they were never going to see him again. He really had lived a very different life before I came along. Another person with fond memories of my dad was his cousin John, who I met in Accra for the first time in 2023. They grew up together when Dad lived in Ghana.
And he was a very good teacher, very detailed teacher. I mean, he teaches with his heart, and he's very intelligent.
Yeah, he was very intelligent. He was a smart guy. He's a determined guy.
Mm.
Good with details.
Yeah, he's a very determined person.
Yeah.
So we knew anything he put his hand out, he would work, he would get it.
Work really was his first love, and nobody knew that more than longtime colleague Peter Ratcliffe, who had this to say about their shared passion for race relations.
You know, we've been committed to the whole issue of race equality now. Peter, all his life and all my life, you know, I'm really interested in projects that actually affect people's lives, and that's exactly how Peter was, and that's why we got on so well.
Because he was married to his work more than anything else. So I think it's very likely that
that's another reason why we got on well. But Peter and I were very, very similar because, you know, we just clicked because we had that same attitude to life, you know, and what we saw as the purpose of our being here.
he was a man who worked hard, who believed in equality and justice for all. At a time when race relations in the UK were under serious scrutiny, during things like the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, my dad was there, investigating systemic bias in the police force. It wasn't just a job, it was his calling.
He was very Ghana-oriented, very Africa-oriented. And I think, well, yeah, I appreciated that.
Even though he dedicated his life to race relations, he decided to keep his Ghanaian heritage and past almost completely out of our home. So I grew up knowing nothing about Ghanaian culture. For a man that dedicated his life to racial equality, he didn't give me a very good insight into what my Ghanaian culture meant to me. I guess he was working on different aspects of that. He was more dealing with, you know, how do we solve inequality in society systemically
in Britain
at the moment in Britain. But you know, I think there's something to be said for, you know, the more informed children are of their past and their present, the better that we can all understand each other. So I think I would love to have known more,
but he was a busy man.
Indeed.
He had his own stuff going on.
For reasons that are still unknown, Dad decided to drop his ties with family back home. This meant that he didn't tell me about them, and even though they'd been so important to him at one time, he no longer stayed in contact.
We missed him, and I got so many calls from people, his own students, asking a lot about him. Where is Uncle Peter? Is he not coming back? So I just keep telling them, oh, Peter will come, he will come. But Peter never came. His own sisters. Later I went to Chebi. So you haven't got Peter yet? I said, oh, I spoke to him. He said he'll be coming shortly. When I was coming from Birmingham, he gave me a jacket and a few other items to be given to his brother and tell him that soon he'll be visiting home. He never came.
Despite cutting off the family back in Ghana, Dad maintained a good relationship with at least one family member, my cousin Edward, who I met back at the end of the first series.
That's
Oh
me.
yeah! Look at that. Looking good.
Yeah, that's me. And he comes to London sometimes to do
Yeah.
some work. And
Yeah.
I'll meet him at Victoria.
Okay.
We'll go and sit in that pub.
Yeah. Yeah, have a couple
buy-
of drinks,
and then
catch
we'll
up.
catch the train back to,
Yeah.
you know. So I was actually, you know.
But it's so strange that why wouldn't he like involve me in that? Like, you know, I might have wanted to like meet my family as well. But he's like, no, I'll just go down the pub. Maybe he just wanted some time away from us. He just wanted to have a drink.
Maybe.
Yeah, catch up.
Catch up.
Yeah.
You know.
So you sort of saw each other semi-regularly.
Yes. Each time he's in London, I'll meet him. So
You had a relationship.
we had a very good relationship.
Yeah, I wish I could have told you at the time and invited you to the funeral at least. Like that would
I
have.
didn't know. I didn't know.
It seems that Dad found it very easy, or maybe just very necessary, to keep certain parts of his life completely separate from one another. So he didn't tell me or my mum that he was going to London to see his cousin Edward. But he also didn't even tell his closest friends about some of his biggest secrets. After my dad died, I found a marriage certificate to another woman completely, and they got married in 1974 in Birmingham.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, well, neither could I.
This is an insight into my friend that I never ever would have imagined.
He died so young, didn't he? I mean,
Yeah.
he died
Wow.
so young.
Well, so here's the thing. He
Yeah.
was born on the 3rd of April, 1936. So actually,
What?
he was 10 years older than.
Wow.
No,
I thought he died in his late 50s or something like that.
No, he was in his 70s. I think he was 70.
Right. Gosh.
I mean, if I was going to lie about my age, I might change the year, but I wouldn't change the day, because what
No,
that meant is
exactly.
that we celebrated his birthday every year on a day that meant nothing to him because it wasn't his birthday.
Of course, of course.
Which
That's his official birthday.
yeah, exactly. He's like the Queen. Yeah. He's got his own thing going on. As many birthdays as he wants. But yes,
Yeah.
that's something that I really want to find out. Like, why did he do that?
Getting to the bottom of why he chose to keep so many secrets from his family was one of the big questions that drove me to start Hidden Roots. My dad's friend Ian was just as keen to know more about who Dad became after they lost contact as I was to learn about who he was before I was born. So he had his own questions for me.
How many years would you say you knew him closely as opposed to remotely?
I would say I don't think I ever knew him closely.
Really?
But I think that, you know, is a thing with first generation African dads. I think it can be quite difficult to get to know those people well.
Really?
I think so. I mean, that's my personal experience, and I've spoken to other friends of mine who've got
Really?
first generation, and it may not be even African dads, but certainly I think there's something about that whole experience. Join the community by subscribing so you don't miss the next episode. And if you have your own stories or thoughts on mine, then let me know in the comments. So that's the story of my dad by some of the people that knew him best. He built deep connections with a few people, but even those people didn't really know him. Ian never knew about his secret wife. Peter never knew his true age. And his cousin John, who he grew up with like a brother, was cut out of his life completely by the end. He didn't know until several years later that he'd passed away. And then there was me. Our relationship had its rocky moments. We were distant at times. I couldn't always work him out. And he couldn't always work me out either. There were times when I genuinely wondered if he loved me at all. But what I know now is that no matter how complicated things got, he never let go. Others came and went, but he was always there for me. And given everything I've learned since about his relationships and the way he lived his life, I don't think I could have asked for much more than that. If you're still here, thanks so much for watching. It really means a lot. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and if you're new to the channel, here's a little taster of what's coming up in Series 2. In this series of Hidden Roots, I'm going to Ghana. I'll travel across the country, meet the family I never knew, and uncover stories that were almost lost forever. Meeting a whole bunch of amazing new people, making new friends, eating a lot of food, laughing, maybe a little bit of crying too. Okay. Dancing, lots of dancing. Finding myself in places I never thought I'd get to see, and being welcomed into Ghanaian culture in ways I never expected. Plus, some big old surprises too. Welcome back to Hidden Roots and the story of what happened next. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can keep up to date with everything that went on in Ghana, with a new episode dropping every Wednesday. And just as a little treat, episode 2 is out now and you can find that here.